How's it going, guys? Citizen O here, and I'm very glad to be here because it's the third season, and we're going to start the season off by talking about food security. But before we get to that, we're going to talk about the tools that I use to work on my garden. And this thing is called the Outdoor Folding Shovel Multi-Tool. You could find them online if you want to look there, or possibly you could also look in some hardware stores. But this thing was pretty handy and it helped me get the garden going. It's made out of stainless steel, aluminum, and foam. It includes a heavy-duty shovel, sharp axe blade, serrated saw edge, hammer, compass, fire maker, and a spade rod. Now, as you can see, I use this thing as a hoe. I also use it as a shovel and a hook. And when I got through my garden, using this was really easy. And I had this thing for quite some time. And it has an adjustable head here where I could use the spade as a hook, as a shovel, any way that I want to, depending on how I'm going to be using it in action. I even took this camping, and this thing it worked great. I really liked it. The serrated edge also works too for hacking some of these weeds. And as you can see here, when I was working on my garden, once I hacked everything up, I was able to scoop up good chunks of weeds when I put it into the spade format, and this thing it worked well. The only gripe I have is it's a bit short, but that's all good because you get a lot of work output out of it and it's pretty durable. And I had tomatoes, cauliflower, peas, and they grew really well. Now, sunlight and water are very important when maintaining a garden because once you get the hang of it, the reward is really good. Now, in this garden, onions were really growing well. I also did peppers, and it was a fun experience. De-weeding is something that I kind of have to get used to, but once I got the hang of it, it worked. Another thing that's a part of food security is harvesting meat by hunting or say trapping, because for instance, once you do that and you know how to process your own meat, it's untouched by the factory farming system. And I'm going to get more into that. But first, I want to highlight when I was able to harvest a deer. Yes, I had my knife with me and I used it to field dress the deer once I put it down. And I'm always going to keep that in mind. Always carry a knife with you, especially once you put down a deer and you're able to field dress it. Now, when we put down the deer, we also, once we took off the hide, my friend, he had it hanged in his garage. It was about -25, -22. We had it hanged in his garage for a couple of days. And then once we did that, we started peeling off the fat layer. And then once we peeled off the fat layer, I started working on the hind quarter legs. And a lot of these cuts are made for roast and for stew. And you know, the pieces that I get out of the deer hind quarter is the eye round, the top round, bottom round, sirloin, rump, and shank. And a lot of these pieces were used for roasts, and it fed my family well. We still have a few more roast pieces left as we go into the summer. But I really enjoyed it. The next step that we did was working on the back straps. Now, the back strap is the next cut of deer meat that I really enjoy eating. It is very tender. I use a lot of it for sandwiches, venison dip sandwiches. But another thing too is when you're removing the back strap, all you got to do is cut and then just start to peel off, and it should just come off. Back strap is a loin, and it's one of the most delicious part of deer meat. Once I got the hang of processing and using the back strap, cutting the back strap, like I said, once you start cutting, cut alongside the spine, and then you just start peeling off and it'll come off. The next really tasty part is the tenderloin, which is located on the inside part of the deer. And once you get the hang, once you start seeing it and cutting it out, it does take a lot of grabbing. So you got to grab it, and as you cut, you just peel off. But I just want to point out, some people get the tenderloin and the loin mixed up. The tenderloin is located on the inside of the deer carcass, and some call it the sweet meat part of the deer. This is one of my favorite parts. This is the one that I usually eat first. Once I harvest and process a deer, I usually put this on the barbecue or put it in the oven, and it's usually the first thing I eat. I try to save some pieces for the summertime on the barbecue, but it's hard. Now, the front shoulder is the next piece I cut on the deer. You can do this before or after, but it's a part of the deer carcass that once I remove it away from the carcass, I start to debone. And the thing that I've noticed with the front shoulder is, once you cut off all the fat and the excessive pieces of meat, and then once you start, taking your meat chunks out for roast, it's really, really good, and it does make up a lot of the meat, which is really, really good. And when I did this process, I got a lot of meat out of it, a lot of roast out of it, and I was able to share with my good friend whose garage I was using when I was doing the meat processing on this deer. So the front shoulder, really good pieces that you get a lot of meat out of, and the result is you get your freezer stacked. This is some of the pieces, not all of them, but once we processed those deers, this was a lot of the pieces that we got once we split everything together. But it is so much worth it. And as I move forward, food security is something that I'm taking one step towards to. There are many other steps, but this was one of them that I like.